Welcome to Against the Tide, the podcast where extraordinary social changemakers share their stories and wisdom. More than a podcast, Against the Tide is a celebration of courageous women who defy expectation to create lasting impact by daring to forge their own paths. We'll dive deep into powerful themes such as embracing discomfort for transformative change, how your past needn't determine your future, and how breaking free from societal labels unlocks your true potential. Join me, Jo Metcalf, to hear stories of incredible women who, by swimming against the tide, prove that extraordinary things can happen. Ready to be inspired? This episode features Bindi Basan, powerlifter and interim CEO for an international tech startup. As a human-centric and values-driven leader, Bindi excels at empowering others. She currently works with founders and CEOs to drive strategic growth, build high-performing teams, and achieve global expansions. But Bindi's talents don't stop at leadership. When she's not shaping the future of technology, you can find her on the dance floor or lifting heavy weights, constantly pushing the limits of her body and mind. Join us as we delve into Bindi's rich heritage and explore how her background has shaped her superpowers, which she is now harnessing to create meaningful impact and scale change. This energising discussion is one you won't want to miss, as we learn what holds us back can ultimately become our greatest strength. Welcome, Bindi. We connected last year, I think it was, and I was drawn to your energy. And I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today to share your energy, learn more, listen, and get to know you a little bit more. So huge thank you for joining me. Can you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself before we jump into some of the questions? That would be great.
Yeah, so my name is Bindi Basan. I'm currently working as an executive advisor for a young company that's now basically going from startup to scale up. It's been a really exciting journey working with them because now they've expanded from Singapore into Dubai, and it sort of really helps bring my experiences through the years of working in technology at large corporates like JP Morgan and HSBC, but also young companies that I've been involved in or companies that have expanded into new territories. So all that learnings and being able to bring to the table for this company and really help them sort of lay down the foundations for scale, but also look at what do they need to start doing and putting in place to help them on this global expansion. I think also my experience in Asia has really helped me being able to support this organisation, who is also based in Asia and now expanding to the Middle East.
Wow, impressive. And you're obviously really experienced and a woman in technology, and you've achieved great things. It'd be fantastic to go back to understand some of your early years and the influences that have enabled you to get where you've got to. So we're both born and bred in Leeds, which is fantastic. But what was growing up in Leeds like for you?
Yeah, it was really interesting because I actually spent the first 5 years of my life with my grandparents, and they moved around multiple cities. So I probably didn't really come to Leeds full time until probably about the age of 5 or 6. So those early years were spent with my grandparents, and there was a valid reason for that. My parents wanted to buy property. Mum had to go back to work after she had me, so I went straight to my grandparents from the hospital. So it was quite. I would probably say that influence from my grandparents, because my grandfather grew up in Africa, and his father was there because he was in the army. And if you go back in history, that would have been because the British bringing people from India into Africa. And then my grandmother was born in India, but when she got married, she had a spectacular journey. Actually, she took a boat at the age of 16, or ship probably, from India to Africa to meet my grandfather.
On her own.
Yes. So my grandparents from Africa then came on to the UK, and so I spent a lot of my time listening to their stories in Africa and India. It just had a sense of fearlessness and courage. It was like everything is possible. But then when I actually came to stay with my parents more full time, then my dad's side, the influence came into play, which was very much about discipline, It was about education, study hard, work hard. So I would say that their influence then became more about programming me for hard work and success. And a lot of that stemmed from, which I'm sure I'm not the only person, you probably hear it from a lot of generations that actually migrated to this country, is that the belief was that the only way they're going to be successful in England is if you work hard and study hard. So education was held in utmost value and respect. So there was no option of just messing around. It was like, yeah, I can see you've got 9 A's, but why did you get a B? It's like that. It was really strict in terms of education and the importance of hard work. So it was it was really interesting because now in reflection, those two influences. And then obviously on top of that, my background is Sikh, so I'm Punjabi, and the values and principles of the culture are really around service to others and standing up for tyranny, um, being fearless, courageous, doing the right thing. But service to others is such a prominent thing in the culture. So those three sets of influences probably had an impact. And then obviously the outside influence of school and education just generally. So you could say, which are probably, as we go into this, the huge impact of growing up in two cultures meant that from childhood I've been able to look at every situation from two different lenses unconsciously without thinking about it. Which and now when we talk about me working internationally, I think a big part of that has been because I'm able to adapt really quickly because I see things through multiple lenses all the time because I've always done it as a child. And I think that's had a huge impact on how the trajectory of my career panned out.
Fantastic. So it sounds like your heritage and your grandparents had a huge influence on you. Is there anybody else in your life that influenced you?
From a childhood perspective,
Yeah.
I think mum, most likely, definitely. She was a strong influence, but my grandma was probably stronger. I just listened to her stories, and it was because it was a world that I wasn't living in, like in Africa or India, and it was just always so fascinating for me. And I know people talk about role models and inspiration, and who do you look up to? And I feel like over time I've realised that all these highly successful people, each and every one of them is doing stuff that actually even the everyday person is doing. Just because they're not a billionaire doesn't mean that they're not actually inspiring somebody in another way. So I think for me, my biggest role model and influences definitely came from the females in my family because they're just strong and fearless and just get the job done attitude.
Okay, fantastic. And having the heritage that you've got and Punjabi girl growing up in Leeds, how did that influence and impact on you as a young person?
Yeah, it was hard because the thing what happens is, and this is not just in England, in any country where a culture has migrated into a country, there's an obsession with a fear of losing it. So it's tend to be held quite closely. So my grandparents would have not wanted the culture to be lost. So the whole principles and values and what an Indian girl should be was held quite tightly. And for me, the biggest lesson came was when I first went out to India to work and realized that India as a country had moved on, and I was living in the Indian values that were present from the 1930s and 40s because that's what my grandparents had taught me. Even the use of language, it was just fascinating that some of the words that I'd use, people were like, which era are you from? Because the Punjabi is so much more pure because it's evolved into slang, for example, over years, right? So that was quite interesting. The holding on to the culture, which meant that there were certain restrictions and certain beliefs, um, in terms of expectations of an Indian girl, as well as having all the education, you need to be able to cook and clean and, you know, raise a family. All that stuff the pressure was there as well from that perspective. And I think what's quite interesting, and you'll probably find this with a lot of people that even, I think I would say even with kids that are growing up in today's world, because a lot of children growing up in Leeds are also from different backgrounds and diverse backgrounds, you are living effectively two different lives, right? Because you've got your home life, which might be a mixture of English and Indian heritage and values, and then you've got the outside world, and you're literally switching all the time, right? Oh, okay, I'm in school now, let's be English. Oh, okay, I'm talking to my grandma now, let's be Punjabi. And so a lot of kids, and it's not just my culture, people from the Caribbean, from Africa, from Eastern Europe, they'll all be doing it. They'll even be doing it right now in today's world. You're constantly having to adapt to the different cultures and different values that those cultures represent. So I think for me, it was quite an interesting upbringing, being able to juggle that and being able to recognise how to be in different situations.
It's fascinating, really fascinating. So, the theme of the podcast is swimming against the tide, so we'll go into that now. So I was absolutely delighted that you were thrilled to and excited to come on to the podcast, and that the theme resonated with you.
Yes.
Why did it resonate with you?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think going back to what I was saying about my grandparents, I think they were always swimming against the tide, moving from continent to continent and then having to uproot and then settle somewhere else and trying to like make a life there. So I think for me, that's one of the things that I feel like I've always done as a child. Actually, you've always got a challenge that you have to overcome. I mean, I guess I've just spoken to you about the challenges as a young girl growing up in Leeds, being able to fit in, which is really important as a child because, I think I'll probably share a story actually. So for me, and this resonated with me quite strongly recently because I went into some schools to talk about this. Because as a child, you don't want to stand out, right? You want to fit in. You want everybody to be your friend. And you want people to accept you for who you are because you're so young and that's the only thing in it. It's like an acceptance. So therefore, you be who you think everybody wants you to be. So it's like, nobody knows about my culture. Nobody knows I eat different food. Nobody knows I can speak two languages because I just wanted to be English because that was the only way that I felt I would be accepted in school and have friends that would be okay with me. Because, these days it's pretty cool to speak two languages and to have multiple cuisines. But for me, as I move on, obviously matured, from a career perspective, as soon as you hit sort of the real world, that's when you sort of really realise. Because I grew up in this bubble, like this is right, this is wrong, and rosy world, right, protected world. And suddenly you hit the real world, and it's like, whoa, okay, there's lots of grey areas here, and there's lots of challenges that you're going to have to face and overcome. So I think for me, if you'd spoken to me probably about 10 years ago, probably would have listed out, this is hard to be a woman in an environment like this, and in tech we don't do this, and this has been challenging. But I think now, when I just really reflect on it, the way that I see it is that I think the challenges are always there in life, and my challenges are different to somebody else's challenges. And if you really look at on a world scale level, there's people out there that don't even have homes or drinking water or food. So I feel like even this whole thing in the workplace around, how do you succeed as a woman was just another challenge. I know it's a strong challenge and where everybody's trying to fight it, but it is a challenge of a type. Equally, landing up in a new country that I don't even know anything about and trying to navigate it is a challenge. Those times where I'm at the other side of the world and I'm on my own and I'm in a different time zone and I need to speak to somebody or speak to friends or family back home and I can't, and you have to deal with it. Or landing up in a new country where I actually moved to and then trying to understand all the rules and regulations of living in that place. So I feel like the attitude that I've taken to, I guess, swimming against the tide and the things that come your way has now been an acceptance that they're always going to be there. And maybe my focus needs to be what can I actually control.
Fantastic. You've talked about working all over the world, which is hugely impressive. Tell us about those experiences about building teams in those different cultures, and helping companies grow, and the skills that you've brought to that.
Yeah, so I think probably one of the best examples to talk about is when I joined a robotics company, probably around 2016 it was. And it was basically to set up the professional services and customer facing capability across the entire Asia Pacific. Now, when I joined the company, they said it was India. I was living in Singapore at the time. I'm like, come and join us. This is exciting. It's the next best thing. Robotics. Everybody's talking about it. You'll be setting up the team in India. And then literally 3 months into the company, India became the entire Asia Pacific. And it was like, well, actually, because it's moving so fast, we actually need a capability across the entire region. Now, just before I go into that and my approach, I just want to highlight that I had actually worked and lived in India and Singapore prior to that. So I had built up knowledge and experience of how cultures operate, the nuances, what's the professional behavior in these countries, and how do people behave, react, their principles, their values, their society norms. So I did go into that with some experience and knowledge. Equally, I also used to do martial arts when I was growing up. So I did Shotokan karate, gave me a lot of exposure to the Japanese culture, which was hugely beneficial. Especially since I built a team in Japan as well. It's really interesting because Asia Pacific is probably one of the world's most complex and diverse regions in the entire world. And when I was actually hired to build out the capability in the region, it was just fascinating. I absolutely loved it. And for me, because the business problem was clear, we need to penetrate this region. We need to hit the ground running, and we need to establish a presence in a region where we don't exist. And that was basically the sort of brief. And we need to build this whole customer-facing capability that can actually interact with customers and partners. So while the business problem was clear, so then my focus was, well, what does the solution for that look like? What does my team across that entire region look like? I was hiring in 5 countries at the same time. And what do I actually want from that? So the way that I approached it is, it was quite interesting because I had this, I probably reflect so much on my personal experiences through dance and fitness, etc. But for me, I had this feeling that I wanted to build a team that if you walked into a conference room full of people, you would know who my team is. They would just stand out. They would just ooze this essence about them, and you would just know they're a team. It's like if you went into a room and there was like sports people, you'd just be able to recognize that, all right, that's that particular team. It just stands out and everybody's oozing the same values and principles. So that was really important for me. And when I built out the team in those regions, what was really interesting is that because of the cultural differences, I had to be really mindful and understand how people behave and how to approach the conversations. But I absolutely loved it. It was fascinating. And in the end, I did actually build that whole professional services capability, which actually today is still talked about years later. People are like, do you know you've got really strong brand equity? Because people still talk about your team. And they're amazing. I mean, they're probably my best team ever. But what I wanted to do was make sure that not only did I bring a team in that was to service the region, but I actually needed them to be high performing and successful. So my focus was, how do I actually build a team? And I stress that point because a number of organizations that have people that are just reporting to the same boss but are not a team, they're in different boats rowing in different directions. So for me, it was really important. When I think about when I'm on stage with 80 dancers, and those 80 dancers are all got a shared purpose and performing for an audience. They're all in sync. They're all there for the same passion. They're all there for the same goal. That's what I wanted from my team. And I don't care if you're based in Australia or in Japan or in Hong Kong or Singapore. I wanted it to be oozing out of them, alignment on a shared purpose and a shared frame of reference.
Fantastic. And how did you do that in practical terms? And what skills did you bring into it that that you've learned over the years?
Yes, so for me, one of the interesting things was when I first got the team together, and some of them had been there for longer because I was hiring doesn't all happen on one day, and some people had just started. So one of the initial things that I did was actually bring them all into one location, and I wanted that team to lay down the rules for themselves. So the first thing I said was, "What does the team? What does it mean to you to be a team?" And had probably had about 20, 25 people in the room at that point. The team did expand, but this was the initial. Um, and they came up with them themselves. And they had things on there like, we want to have healthy debate, we want to have disagreements. And do you know what? That is really fascinating because they'd agreed that out front between themselves. Later on, when we had situations where they're having a conversations with each other and they've got disagreements, nobody's kicking off, or I'm not having to step in and facilitate a conversation between two people getting annoyed, because they'd agreed to it. It was their way of working. We have agreed that we are comfortable in debating and disagreeing with each other, and because it was agreed up front, when it did happen, they just got on with it. And also in that, one of the things that I think a lot of people don't think about when they're onboarding new people also is there's so much focus on, go read this documentation. Here's the onboarding. Ta-da!
Tip lost.
Yeah. And it's like, and I'd always say to my director at the time, I says, look, in order for people to truly learn, they need to have an experience. They're never just going to learn by reading a book, right? They need to experience it. I basically shifted all the training so that it actually became an experience. So instead of, this is what you say if you go to a customer, this is like, right, we've got a customer scenario happening right now. We've sent 2 consultants in. This customer has been using our product for 6 months. You're going to be talking to the CEO and the CTO, and they're absolutely pissed with what's happening. Deal with it. And they actually got to experience it in a safe environment and actually apply it that they'd been reading in books and on documents for real. And then they realised that, oh my God, I didn't fully understand that. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't think about asking that question. So for me also, the whole thing was around about how do I set them up for success?
That goes back to what you were talking about, service and putting other people, thinking about others. What's really striking me, and this has when we've spoken before, that you've got lots of different sides to you. You've got a tough side, you've got a vulnerable side, you've got a caring and compassionate side. How, having all those different sides, do you harness that in a way that brings the best out of others and the organisations that you work with?
Yeah, and I think probably more recently there's been more of an acceptance of all those sides. I think growing up, and maybe coming back to some of the points you made earlier, I probably felt that in order to succeed in the technology world, I had to be this strong, independent woman and stand there and solve every problem. But in more recent years, I've learned that actually I just need to be authentically me and just have every aspect of mine brought to the table and not hide it. I'm so out there now with my culture and my background, but it wasn't like that all the time. It was like, I mean, it might be harsh to say, but I think my early parts of my career, I was probably successful because I was being English. I was being English in that environment, as opposed to authentically showing up as a collective me in every aspect. But when I soon learned that that actually is quite powerful, especially working internationally, it was just so much more rewarding and easier to sort of bring to the forefront. And there's so many aspects. I mean, like I guess my strength training. Yeah, I lift some really heavy stuff. Like, yes, I go lift some heavy stuff every week. But I think about strength training and what has it given me? I mean, it's like, first of all, I feel amazing when I do it, but it's just taught me so much and reinforced the power of consistency. People say, oh my God, I could never do what you do. I'm like, actually, you could, because I just didn't walk in the gym and suddenly lift 170 kg off the floor. That is, years of consistency showing up every week when no matter how you feel, You might fail, your performance might be low, you might not like it. You think, oh God, whatever. But you have to keep doing it because success is never overnight. That was a big lesson that I learned from strength training. Also, it feels great anyways. Dance taught me stuff like the power of how do you bring people from all walks of life together with a shared purpose to deliver an outcome. And also dance taught me a lot about how to do presentations and stand up in front of a crowd, because in dancing, people are paying for you to dance and actually storytell and engage an audience. And it's fascinating when you are on stage and you know that every person in that audience is just looking at you. You apply those same skills in the business sense, right? That's what you're doing. You're getting on stage and you are engaging an audience. So those sort of things. I think that the vulnerability side of it, I think that's something that probably more recently I've definitely come to sort of embrace the more feminine side. But also the biggest thing that I think for me is that I've had this recently as well. People think that because you're in a leadership position, you need to have all the answers, which isn't true. I mean, like this. I was never in the right place to tell my team in Australia what to do during COVID or what to do in Hong Kong. The rules and regulations were changing every single day. So how do I get the best out of my team, even when there's this pandemic going on, there's all this sort of crisis going on? Was to ask them, how can I support you? What do you need in order to be able to, you know, still be successful in your day-to-day work, but also support your family, your community, whatever's important to you? And just being open to ask those questions and not pretend like I have all the answers, was able to then move things forward. And for me as a leader, the important thing is being there for them and supporting them in whatever they need in order to support all their environments around them, the work environment, the family environment, the community environment.
That's really fascinating. Again, you talked in there about bringing the feminine side in. Is that something that you've resisted, and what difference has it made leaning into that?
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
resisted. And it's probably because I've had this whole discipline education and this whole belief that everybody sort of says that in order to be successful in the workplace, you have to be strong and assertive and, don't show your vulnerable side. So you probably, well, I have spoken to you about this, but I did do a couple of retreats last year, which were very much focused on going through my own journey actually and just reflecting on life and the things that I'd actually adopted because of society or conformity. And I think coming out of that was probably a strong realization that actually I can be my masculine energy and I can be my feminine energy. And both are powerful and both are amazing and both are beneficial in the workplace, in home life, in the community. So I think that's probably the thing that I've actually how how can I say toned down? I know I've probably toned it down because even on those retreats when I first stood up to talk about my journey, I stood up like I was the frigging head of APAC or CEO standing up talking. Just like I was already putting on a persona because that was the expectation. But then when I just stood up and talked as Bindi, it just felt so much better. And the thing is, I think for me the realization is that you can still achieve what you need to achieve in an organization being in that state.
You give off an energy that I can do it, you can do it. That's sort of yeah, empowering. So thank you. That's
I
fantastic.
think the other thing that it does is which is something I don't think I've ever done really, but it allows me to be in the moment. And that is personally really powerful, right? So when people said to me when I was in Singapore, for example, just recently, people were like, "Do you miss the UK?" And then I'm here like, "Oh, you must be missing Singapore." And my answer is, no to both of those questions because I'm actually exactly where I need to be right now in this moment and making the best of this moment. And that is quite liberating. I'm not saying I'm always in that state. I try to be, but that was quite liberating because once you actually are able to sort of drop the barriers and the restrictions around worrying about the past or dealing with the future, and just making the most of what is current, which is the truth. It's just really empowering.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I know you've done some work in schools and some speeches, and talking about your very successful career. What would you tell the next generation of leaders?
Well, I think first of all, just go for it. I I am people focused leader, and I always think that as a leader, you shouldn't fear about being the person in the room that doesn't know everything. I feel like there's this whole society impression that you need to know all the answers. You need to be better than every single member of your team. Actually, my advice is hire everybody that's better than you because you'll automatically be successful. And also focus on how do you make those people successful? Because if they are successful, you are automatically successful. And it doesn't, processes, technology will always fall into place. But if your people are not right, then all the other processes and tech will not matter. And for me, human connection is so important and powerful. So I think from a leader perspective, I would like it if all leaders were, you know, people focused leaders and also customer centric. I am totally obsessed with customer experience, and I'm actually appalled at the number of organizations that don't actually put it to the forefront, because at the end of the day, that's also people. So I think being customer centric and being people centric is critical in any business. Then there will probably be elements of business where maybe more of a process driven leader is more applicable. I don't know, maybe setting up an server environment, where it's quite structured, maybe uh, that might suit better. But I've always been people focused. And I think that for me, that's really important.
Fantastic. People at the heart of
Yeah.
everything. So finally, final question. What would you like to see change for the next generation, particularly for those that are coming from similar backgrounds to yourself?
Yeah, I think that would be really nice if people are given awareness of what is possible. Like really possible, like in the schools, just like really, I mean, you can see when I went to the schools this year and I was talking to the kids and I just think there's so much passion and energy and excitement, and they don't know what they don't know, but you just need to give them a thread or an idea, and it could take them places and just inspire them to take action. And I think also, I hope the next generation doesn't have to live in fear of being called names if they're walking down the street and they're of a particular color or a particular background. I hope that they can embrace themselves in the entirety, and that the actual organizations that are out there actually take advantage of that. I've already said it actually. If you want to expand globally, tapping into people that have grown up in multiple cultures will take you so far because they're already doing it. They're already they've lived it, so they'll be able to turn up in another country for you and handle the situation. They won't be like, oh my God, because there'll be some element of culture shock, but they'll be able to adapt a lot faster. And there's just companies that actually do that out there. Emirates do it, L'Oreal have done it, take advantage of multicultural staff members. So I think that would be probably my thing. I just hope that they can see opportunity and that they actually are, I guess, given the chance to experience or at least be told about possibility and what is possible.
And make change happen. So, have you got any final words of wisdom for young people and young people growing up in Leeds today?
Yes, I think what I would say is that when you're presented with an opportunity, just say yes. You never know where it might lead. I think we've talked a lot about my international experience today. If I hadn't have said yes to the first opportunity to go work in India, then everything else subsequent to that wouldn't have happened. Also, I would not be sat here talking to you today about my current role helping a business in Singapore and Dubai. It just would never have happened. Everything that you're currently doing today, if you track back, there would have been a decision that you made ages ago that has led you on this trajectory. I think for me, that is really important. Say yes. And secondly, you don't know who you're inspiring. I know people that have said yes to the opportunity that inspired me. And I'm sure that the children will say yes to an opportunity that will inspire the generation after them as well.
Fantastic. And any final words of wisdom for leaders out there today that may be listening?
I think one of the things that I'm super passionate about, and I just wish every leader would listen, is that when you are hiring and building a team, please think outside the box. I feel like we get so stuck on, I need these skills or I need these competencies, and we don't look at person as a whole. There's so many values and so many skills that people bring from themselves as a whole. So, for example, if you're talking to somebody who's grown up in a war zone, just think about the resilience that they will have. It's just incredible. I think one of the examples that I talk a lot about is one of the powerlifters and strongman guys in the gym. He's about 18 when I first met him. He's 19 now. But I remember when I first started talking to him, and he was telling me what he was lifting in terms of weight, and I told him about my career, and he's like, "Oh, but that's not something that I'm ever going to be able to achieve." And I was sat there thinking, if I was hiring right now, I would hire you. I don't care if you don't have any technical skills. What you have is the consistency, the dedication, the determination, the ability to show up even when you're not feeling like it, the ability to get up once you've failed. You cannot lift the weight that he was lifting if you did not show up every single week in the gym. And that sort of dedication and commitment, knowing that there might be times where you walk out of there and you think, oh my God, I feel terrible, I didn't achieve it. But you still turn up and you come back and you come back and you come back. Those skills are just priceless. And if people are embodying them and they're already showing that they're doing it, then why wouldn't you want to tap into that?
Well, that's been hugely valuable. I always walk away from our conversations feeling like I can take on the world. So hopefully our listeners feel exactly the same. Thank you for joining today. Thanks for listening to Against the Tide, brought to you by Think for Wellbeing, the strategic consultancy for social change makers, with thanks to Louise Kavanagh at Purposeful Marketing and the team at Sticks and Glass. Subscribe to Against the Tide wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an inspiring episode.